Good afternoon, everyone. We've got a bunch of people, I can see the numbers changing, so we're going to give everyone a second to get connected. Just want to test and make sure that the tech is working. So if everyone or some people that are connected could just post in either the chat or the questions and just let me know if you can see the slide that says webcast starts soon. That would be great. And okay, and perfect. I'm getting people, okay, lots of people are telling me that they can hear me and see me, and hello, and perfect. Welcome, everyone. Okay, so the number is still changing a little bit, so we'll give it another minute or so. How's everyone doing? I hope everyone is having a great start to 2021. This is apparently a hot topic, so we have a whole bunch of people that are joining us. I'm going to try and answer as many of the questions as we get as possible. Jamie, I don't know whether or not, so you have the ability to remove the questions that I don't need to answer. So there's a whole bunch of questions in there now. But if you can, that would be great so that I know when we're answering questions, I actually can get to them faster. Okay, so welcome everyone. Let's see if my slide should have changed for everyone, hopefully. You can see a picture of me. I think my webcam is also showing, so you should be able to see me as well. My name is Juliet Aurora, for those of you that don't know me. I am the CEO of AIS Solutions and the Ninja Network. AIS Solutions is a bookkeeping and QuickBooks training firm. We're located virtually, actually, but our physical office address is Burlington, Ontario. I am the author of The Ninja Way, Your Journey to Firm of the Future. If you're interested in reading about our story and hearing what our journey was like as we went from 0 people and making no money to now we're a team of 16, would love to have you support us by purchasing the book. You can find it on Amazon, and all proceeds of the book support Nina House, which is our charitable initiative, I think more than anything, that we're trying to get off the ground, which is going to be a women's shelter for women experiencing domestic violence. So would appreciate the support. So a little bit about my firm, which may help you in some of the questions that you may want to ask me. And I'm an open book, so ask me whatever you want. I'm going to, as I said, I'm going to try and get to as many of the questions as possible. And I have left room as well in the presentation for that. So I had a physical office for about 10 years in Burlington, and my team was all local to me and would come into the office. Last year, we made I guess in 2019, we created a hybrid team. Some people were remote, some people were on site, and that didn't work for us. And I'm happy to talk about why that didn't work for us. And so we made the decision to go 100% virtual, which we did last year. Last March, I think pretty much everybody went virtual, but it was actually a planned initiative for us. And so now we are coast to coast. I've got team members in BC and Alberta, all the way through to New Brunswick, with still a significant number of team members that are in Ontario. So we're going to be talking about what that looks like because so many businesses and so many people are right now having to run their firms virtually. So this is what the next hour is going to look like. A little bit of an introduction about some of the remote stats, I guess, remote worker stats. Then we're going to talk about, there's so much information that's available out there right now that is talking about working remotely. So I wanted to focus on some things that may not necessarily be general information that's really easy to find. And probably the 2 most important things that have made this work for us. First one is something called asynchronous collaboration, and we're going to talk about what that is if you're not familiar with the term. And then team building. That's always a big one that people are concerned about. What is my culture? How do I develop my culture? How do I build my team when no one is in the same office? And then I've left 15 minutes at the end for questions, But again, if there are questions specifically as we go through, please do ask them along the way when you think of them, and I will try to answer them as best I can. Okay, everyone ready? Let's just double check if we have any questions. Can I repeat the name of the book again? Sure, it's The Ninja Way, Our Journey to a Firm of the Future. And if you search Ninja with a K, so it's K-N-I-N-J-A on Amazon, nothing else comes up except our book. So it's pretty easy to find. Okay. You probably are tired of hearing this term, but I felt that it was fairly important because it is such a big reason why remote work and virtual has become so important. COVID-19, I mean, it's really been a game changer for our businesses, our clients' businesses. Working from home, has become the new normal, whether it was an intentional choice for you or, you just had to do it. The question is, are you adjusting? Is your team adjusting? Or your clients adjusting? And whether your team is working from home, out of necessity, out of design, your business has to run a little bit differently when it's virtual. And that's what we're going to talk about for the next 45 minutes to an hour. So let's start with some stats. Now this is an interesting stat. So this is from 2019. And in 2019, this is a US stat, and I imagine in Canada it'll be similar. It's a lot harder to get stats in Canada. But in 2019, 43% of the US workforce was already either working remotely partially or completely. I was quite surprised as to how high it was in 2019. And as you can imagine, in 2020, it would be significantly higher. But over the last 4 or 5 years, that number has grown considerably. It wasn't 43% in 2015. I think it was probably 17%, just looking at my notes. So it's a huge increase in the 4 or 5 years. And the one thing that has kind of come out of the shift that we've had going remote is a lot of companies are now talking about letting their employees work remotely even post-pandemic. Businesses that have said, well, remote doesn't work for us, have now learned that, well, maybe it does work, and maybe it is something that they can offer to their employees. And so you are going to see that it is a greater trend even after we're all allowed to go back into the workforce. You'll see lots of studies that talk about how much more productive remote workers are. This is a very conservative stat, which is 1.4 days. So according to this survey, remote workers typically work 1.4 days more, or get 1.4 days more of productivity in a given month, which works out to be about 3 weeks a year. So that's pretty good. If you are getting an extra 3 weeks of productivity per team member, that's something you certainly want to consider. Other studies have shown that remote workers are 30 to 45% more productive than their in-office counterparts. If you take it on the low end, that's 17 and a half weeks, which is mind-boggling. And they've actually been doing some research and surveys since the pandemic, and the stats are that for most companies that have had to shift to remote workforce, 67% of them have the same productivity from their staff, and 27% report that their employees are more productive. So lots of variation in that, from 3 weeks to 17 and a half weeks, but certainly worth considering even if it's on the low end. So if you had an extra 3 weeks or an extra 17 and a half weeks per person in your office, would that change anything for your business? Probably, right? So let's dive into some of the things that are going to make your team more productive, but also happier, which also translates to more productive. So before we can kind of dive into what makes it work, we have to identify what the challenges are of remote teams. And these are probably the 4 most common items that come up over and over and over again. Face-to-face communication, that they miss face-to-face communication. They don't communicate as well, so there's lots of miscommunication. That they miss the social interaction that they have when they're in an office and they're working with other team members. And that it's also more difficult to build trust among team members if they're not all together at some point, or spending a lot of time together. That the relationships between your coworkers are harder to develop. So those are 4 of the probably the most common challenges. And please, can you put in your in the chat or the questions whether or not you're encountering any other challenges of remote teams that are outside of, as you can see, most of these relate to communication and relationships. Okay. So now let's talk about the benefits of remote teams. We're going to obviously spend more time on the benefits than we are on the challenges. Interestingly enough, increased job satisfaction. There's a company, and I didn't write down the name of the company when I was making my notes for the presentation. There's a company that does something called a workforce happiness index. Just kind of a cool term if you think about it. And out of the remote employees, they would measure a 75 out of 100 on the happiness index for being at work, compared to 71 for in-office employees. So not a huge shift. I would have thought it would have been a bigger differential, but at least it's not lower, which is the most important thing. But from the employee side, employees report that they're more productive than they would be if they're physically in an office. And the reason for that are a couple things. One is, there's less distractions. They're not being interrupted. They get to set up their work environment exactly the way that they want. There's no corporate office, or there's no one else saying, well, no, this is the desk that you have to have, and this is, the chair that you have to have, and this is what your walls need to look like and what you're allowed to put on your walls. So they have much more control over the environment that they work in. And as I'm sure you know, what your environment is when of where you're working does have a big impact on how you work. So employees have reported they're more productive because of the environment. So they're able to create a more comfortable workspace for themselves. And then the other reason that they've indicated they're more productive is they don't have to deal with office politics. And whether you have a small office or you have a big office, there's always office politics. And office politics are harder to kind of kick in and take hold and take over in a remote environment, which is definitely an advantage. I thought this one was an interesting one as well, better mental health. So studies have shown that employees who have a flexible work schedule, and not only necessarily, where they're working 100% remotely. So as we go through the topic over the next 45 minutes, think about this from the perspective of whether they're 100% remote, or even if you give your team the option of flex hours or a flexible schedule. Some of the benefits you're still going to see even if they're not 100% virtual. And back to the mental health study, it was that if employees had a flexible schedule, they had nearly 2 times better mental health. So than those that didn't have it. So that I think is very interesting. And again, especially over the last 9 to 10 months, the mental health has been kind of a front and center topic for businesses and for our industry as well. So certainly something to consider. And then remote workers make more money. I'm not really sure how that works. Again, it's a study that just talks about some of the benefits. I do know that if you look at, that they aren't having to commute. They're not having to, necessarily they go out and they buy lunch. Or if they're, on their way into the office, then they go to Starbucks every day. That remote teams tend to spend and save about $4,000 a year. But according to the study, they actually make more money as well. And part of that is is possibly because the companies, if you're 100% virtual, don't have the overhead costs and so are able to offer you a higher salary as well. So some of the benefits of remote teams. Okay, so let's see if we have any questions before we jump into the next section. Can I cite the studies? I can. I don't have them in my notes, but I'll see if I can determine where I got them from. Internet availability absolutely is a problem in rural areas. Yep, something to consider. Disorganized, yeah, that's absolutely. That's where who the person is that you're allowing them, to work remotely. It's going to be very important that they have the ability to organize themselves. Okay, let's jump into the next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk about asynchronous collaboration. This was huge for my firm, which is why I wanted to make sure that we talked about it. So for those of you that don't know what it is, let's start with that. So here is a Wikipedia definition. I'll give you a second to read it and then we'll kind of go through it. Okay, so asynchronous in its simplest form, asynchronous communication is where you send a message or you ask a question, but there is no expectation that you're going to get a response immediately. So an example of that is sending an email. If you send an email, I send you an email now, you may not reply to it until later on today or tomorrow morning, but when I send you that email, I don't expect that as soon as I've hit send, I'm going to get an answer back within like 2 minutes. That's an example of asynchronous communication. So synchronous communication is obviously the opposite. When you send a message or you ask a question and whoever it is that is the recipient, they'll process what you have asked or said and then give you an immediate response. So telephone calls, in-person meetings, those are all examples of synchronous communication. Even if you think about chat forums like chat boxes, like Slack, for example, in some cases, those can be synchronous communication, but they can also be asynchronous communication. Again, it's when the response is expected, it's going to be the biggest driving factor. So a couple of challenges with real-time or synchronous communication. And so on average, they found there was a study, and again, like I said, there's been tons of studies that have been out there that have come out over the last 9 months with so many businesses working from home. But that the study, I think it was in the New York Times, talked about how on average, employees were spending more than 50% of their time communicating with colleagues. Now that doesn't mean it's 50% wasted time. It's 50% of their time. So whether that is in a meeting, whether that's on the phone, whether it's a water cooler chat, whether it's sitting down with somebody or they're walking by your office and they ask you a question, 50% of your time was being spent in some kind of communication with your colleagues. And what we found is that workdays need to be planned around meetings. So the more meetings that there are, people are having to juggle the other work that they have to do around those workdays or around those meetings. And that changes the structure of the workday. So they may have, a meeting at 11 o'clock and then another meeting at 1, which gives them like 45 minutes in between the two meetings, which isn't really enough time to dive in and really do anything. So they tend to just do, some things that don't really take a lot of time because your workday is being planned around where you need to have these meetings. And of course, distractions. People stopping by in your office. As they're walking by, they have a question, water cooler chat, lots of distractions, lots of interruptions. I really like this, this quote. It doesn't really fit into anything, but I thought it was great, so I'm going to share it anyways. And I'll just have a look at some of these questions and see if I can answer them. Okay, so Paul asked, what is the responsibility of the employer to ensure the employee's home workstation meets ergonomic standards and they work in proper ergonomic manner? It's a huge issue and a cost to us as the employer. Okay, so more than anything, that is going to be, it's going to be a company decision as to what you want to provide to your employees who are working from home. You can provide everything, and then you have much more say and control over, whether it's an ergonomically keyboard and mouse and chair. But if you're not providing it to the employee or providing them an allowance to upgrade their chair or upgrade their keyboard, then you really have no say in what kind of workstation they have. So it's a balancing act as to if you want to be able to maintain that control or dictate what it needs to look like, you have to provide it to them either in terms of you send it to them and set it up, or you provide them an allowance for them to go out and purchase those items. So great question. Okay. Everyone liked my my quote. I thought it was interesting. Now they wake up and they check Slack. Probably, a better use of their time. I don't know if it's a better use of their time. We'll leave that for a discussion for another day. So we talked about some of the challenges of real-time communication. Let's go through some of the benefits of asynchronous communication. And I love these, and I have absolutely seen these in our own firm. The first one is that it gives the employee control over the workday. And that's a huge one. And we may not think how big of a deal it is, but it absolutely is when someone feels like they have control over how they can, set out their day. They're going to be happier because they're in control. And especially in a remote environment, if you also give them, flex hours or flexibility of what the hours are that they can work, and especially for parents that have, had to manage homeschooling and childcare over the last 8 or 9 months, giving them that flexibility allows them to control when they set their meetings, when they're doing their work that works best with the rest of their life. And so you want to make sure that you're addressing however you want that to be structured. So in our office, we started out with flex hours that you had to work 20 hours out of the 40 working hours within our designated business hours. And what was interesting was when I suggested this, everyone said, well, and can we still work? Our office hours were 8:30 to 4:30. Can we still work 8:30 to 4:30? Is that okay? And we said, sure. The reason we're starting this program is that you get to control when you want to work, what's best for you, and give you the flexibility. And so, some of the people on my team said, well, yeah, I'm still going to work 8:30 to 4:30. It works really well for me. And fast forward, it's been a year. Nobody works 8:30 to 4:30, which I think is quite interesting because there were so many people who were quite happy with the 8:30 to 4:30. Most of my team works 7 to 2, 7 to 3. So by 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, everybody's done. I have a team member who starts at 5, and so they're usually done by noon. I have a team member who tends to take an hour and a half to 2 hours in the middle of the day so that they can take their dog for a walk, and that they can do a yoga class. Obviously, when we could do yoga classes outside of the home. So it really has been a huge, advancement for them to be able to control when they schedule their work time. Higher quality communication. So you wouldn't anticipate that this would be a result or a benefit of asynchronous communication, but it absolutely is. And here's why. When someone is not expecting an immediate response, in order to make sure that they get a complete response, they're going to give you a complete question. So the communication that you're going to, the thought process behind the question is going to be in a lot more detail so that it can avoid the back and forth that, I don't ask you the complete question, which means, I've now waited for the answer that isn't complete, so I have to ask you again. So you're going to find that people are going to be more specific in what it is they're looking for, or what they need help with, or what the answers are that they need in order to avoid that back and forth. We talked a little bit about control in terms of planning, but what you'll also find is that, especially in scenarios, which is what it is in our firm, we've got two team members who work on a client file, and so there's a lot of back and forth that needs to go back and forth between them as they collaborate. And what we find is that if there's a deadline for Friday for something for this client, and it involves both of them, they have to plan their own schedules and the workload to make sure that both sides of that equation can be done with enough time and going back and forth to hit the deadline on Friday. So they tend to plan their schedules better because they now have to typically consider the schedule, the flex schedule of somebody else. The better that things are planned, the less stress that it is for everyone, because people aren't necessarily doing things, in the last minute, an hour before a deadline, where they're all kind of running together and trying to get it done. So it certainly is an interesting byproduct of it as well. More deep work. We've talked about distractions. We've talked about interruptions. If you have, and there are actual books about deep work, that if you have, something that you need to focus on for strategy or problem solving, and accounting, bookkeeping certainly falls into that, where you kind of have to get into a zone to make some momentum or get some momentum. That if you're always being interrupted or there's always distractions, you never get that bandwidth to do deep work. And so you're always, jumping from thing to thing, or you can't really, dive down and get into a problem because you don't have, an extended period of time to be able to do that. But because they have control over their schedule, have control over when they're replying to people, they have the opportunity to do more deep work. Interestingly enough, is you also get less questions. If people have to wait for an answer, sometimes they'll figure it out themselves, or they'll research it themselves. So when you're in a physical office and you don't know the answer, it's so easy to just get up and walk over to someone else and say, hey, do you know the answer to this? Or I have this question. If you aren't going to necessarily get a response right away, you may not ask the question because you'll figure it out. It's time sensitive. You can't wait until someone else responds to you. And so you are going to find that people are going to be more proactive as well, and there will be less questions that go out across the board. And then this last one that I love, which is automatic documentation and greater transparency. Because so much of the communication is written, whether it's an email, whether it's a Zoom call that you've recorded, or whether it's a instant chat messaging platform that you're using, when you ask the question and you get the answer, you have it documented. What you'll also find is if it's the same question that's being asked over and over again, and you're having to give the same response then to different team members, then you also know, okay, I need to do a team training on this, or I need to create a process around this. And so it does also help you move your firm forward if you see a pattern of what types of questions are coming up over and over again. Okay, so lots of questions coming in. Okay, so how do I set up a culture of asynchronous communication? Hang on to that question, Samantha. We are going to talk about it. And lots of pre-scheduling, remote team, absolutely, and that they love having their own schedule. Excellent. Okay, so expectations. So this is answering your question, Samantha. Is the most important thing is setting the expectations of your organization as a whole. And it does come from you. It has to start with you, that you have to actually address the elephant in the room that you're not going to get an immediate response. Internally for us, so we use Teamwork as our project management system, which has an instant chat messaging system attached to it. Very similar to Slack, it's just integrated into our project management system. And so normally what we have is when someone starts their day or is working, that they actually type in the chat, you know, good morning, or I'm here, or I'm working till noon, just so that other people that may have to interact with them or need something from them has an idea of when they're working, what their hours are. So setting the expectations of your other team members is going to be very important. But you have to just reinforce, and it does take time, it is a transition period, it doesn't happen overnight, that an immediate response is not required, but what are the steps that they do or that they take if they require an immediate response? So is there a separate chat channel that you have for urgent? Do you tag them on a specific chat so that they get notified? So identifying, it depends really on how you communicate with your team and your organization, but identifying some kind of a process where here's what happens if an immediate response is required, because there are going to be times that you will need one, but here's what the norm is, and that you are not going to get an immediate response because everyone is working different time zones, everyone's working on different clients, everyone is working at different times. So there's a lot of factors that require asynchronous communication, but addressing how do you deal with the issues at the time when you have an immediate need is very important. And you want to set, you know, team-wide expectations. Is it the expected response time is 24 hours, that you have to reply, you know, within 24 hours to any of the questions that you've received, whatever that guideline is for you, you know, 1 business day, 2 business days, and set the guidelines internally of what the response time is between team members, as well as what the response time is with clients. And you may have different guidelines for different levels of clients, depending on how you have your practice structured. But setting the guidelines, and you need to set the guidelines so that your team can enforce them and carry them out. And then the other one that's really big is over communicating. When you think that you have explained it well enough, or you have said it enough times, say it once more, or give it a little bit more information. Over communication is probably the key to make sure that there is enough communication, because usually what you think is enough information isn't always enough information, or at least that's what I've learned anyways, is that I thought that, hey, I gave you all the answers, but no, I didn't. There was stuff that I missed. So setting expectations is very important. Okay, so we've got a couple more questions. How do you best guide your team to write effective communications? That's an interesting question. I guess more than anything, it's outlining for them, you know, what's the question and what is the desired outcome. As long as you can address both of those when they're asking a question, they're more likely to have a successful response, because the other person will not only know what they're asking, but what they're looking for and what the timeline is that they're looking for it. So it comes back to that over communicate and setting your expectations. Dealing with employees working from home with concentration focus problems like ADD. Absolutely, that is a tough one. I'm not sure it would be any different than if they were in the office. It's still something that you would need to address with them. If it's something that an employee is aware, you know, that is a challenge for them, or that they, you know, it's a condition that they have, then they have to be really structured in how they handle their day and how they manage their workload and what the distractions are in the environment that are around them. It really will rely a great deal on the employee being much more responsible with being able to manage it on their own and not expecting someone else to manage it for them. You are going to find as well that there are going to be people who do really well as a remote team member and people who don't do really well. And that's not, that doesn't mean that they're a good employee or a bad employee. It's a different environment. So when you're hiring people, make sure you're communicating with them, what some of the challenges are that your existing team finds. You want to set the expectations, perfect slide for it, as to what it's going to look like. Some people think that they're going to love it and hate it, and some people think they're going to hate it and love it. So you want to give them as much information as possible as you make this transition. When we went through the transition from physical office to virtual, what we actually did is we introduced it slowly. So we'd always had everyone could work 10% of their time from home, but it was usually, they'd work a day and then there would be a couple days and then they'd work a day, or it would be one day a week or something like that. And so when we made the transition, we had them work for back-to-back days, or a week at a time that they would work from home and then come into the office. And the reason that we did that was we found that what was happening is people would, work from home. Oh, I need this, but it's at the office. Okay, I'll put it aside and I'll do it tomorrow. So it wasn't a true work from home experience, because they were leaving things that were easier for them to do at the office. And if they're working extended periods of time at home, they need to be able to not have to put things off till when they're in the office. And so we would give them extended periods, it would be a week, this week you're working from home, and let's identify what the challenges are. Are there client challenges, dealing with clients, communicating with clients? Is there paperwork challenges? Was there collaboration challenges with other team members? And if you go through that transition slowly, it's easier to address one type of challenge rather than being hit with all of them at the same time. Now, in our scenario right now, over the last 9 or 10 months, a lot of people were just thrown into that scenario and had no choice. So maybe even, walk it back a couple steps and try to identify what some of the challenges are that people are having, so that you can address them. Okay, so Allison's how do I train, build trust, and coach entry-level staff remotely? We'll talk about that in the next section. So hang on to that question. You guys are asking questions that are in my slide deck, which is perfect. I'm just going to put this slide up here. You are going to get a copy of the recording as well, just so that you have this for reference. I'm not going to spend a lot of time kind of diving into it, but it's tools. Some of the tools that are available for remote work. So Zoom, obviously, I think everybody knows Zoom and how it works now. If you had Zoom shares or Zoom stock, I think you did really well over the last year. And then there are instant messaging apps like Slack, Teams, if you're Microsoft, or any kind of chat. So as I said, we use Teamwork, and we have a Teamwork chat built into our project management system, but it allows you to have kind of an instant messaging system with other team members that are working, that you can get an immediate response or even otherwise. Rescue Time is another piece of software that you install on your computer, and it gives you actually a report and tracks your productivity as to what apps you use, how often you use them, and how much time you spend on them in a given week. Sometimes that can be helpful to identify where there are gaps or where there's problems. Loom is a video recording piece of software which allows you to easily create a video to send it to someone else. It basically sends them a link to the video, and it's a great way to answer complex questions or ask complex questions, either with team members or with clients. You need some kind of a shared document portal if you've got a remote team. So I've put some up that are on there, Google Drive, OneDrive, ShareFile, Dropbox, but you need some kind of a portal that everyone can access documents. And then for us, our project management system, and I've listed with dashboards just because that's been a game changer for us, but our project management system really is the driving force. There's no way that we could work remotely if we didn't have a solid project management system. And especially because we have team members, multiple team members working on the same client file, there's no way for them to communicate with each other as to, you know, who's doing what, where people are at, how far they are along in a project. And so the project management system becomes really a key tool for us to make sure that this can work. Okay, so we've talked about asynchronous communication, but it's yin and yang. You absolutely need synchronous communication as well, because you need that human element. Don't lose it, because fundamentally we are all human and like social interaction. And I'm sure that over the last 9 or 10 months, it's kind of been reinforced as to how important that social interaction is. So don't let your employees feel disconnected from each other. Team building is so important, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So let's see if we have any other questions. So Charlie's asking the questions being asked. I don't know if anyone other than the panelists can see the questions. If you can see it, it would be in the panel that you actually typed in your question. So if you can't, then it must not be something that's available. So Suzanne really found everything flowed better for the one employee that actually made a schedule and stayed focused. Absolutely. The planning piece is going to be so fundamental for remote work to be consistent and to be successful. So do you use rescue time? I actually use it. I don't use it for my team. I've given them the option of, if they want to install it on the computers for themselves, they can. I use it for myself to figure out and analyze over a given period of time. I usually look at it every month. When I installed it, I used to look at it every month or every week as to where my time was being spent. You know, how much time was I actually spending on Facebook? And I think I was spending as much time as I was. It was great feedback for me to improve my own personal work habits. So I've shared it with my team, but I don't ask them to send me their reports or anything like that. And our project management system is Teamwork. It's teamwork.com. It's our project management system. Okay, so let's dive into team building. So team building is all about building personal connections. And it was one of the questions, you know, I think it was Samantha that asked, how do we build a culture? So I'm sharing a couple of things on here as to what works for us, what we have heard works for other people. There's so many different options that are available. A monthly one-on-one with supervisor, that was kind of a recommendation. We do it weekly, and we call them huddles. And once a week, our team, we have a team leader who meets with each of her individual team members. And it's usually a 15 or 20-minute connection, but it's been fabulous. Eliminates a lot of the frustration of not all being under the same roof, gives them at least, you know, a connection once a week with someone else on the team. So a monthly one-on-one, or in our case, we do a weekly, has been really successful. Team retreats. This is something that, you know, obviously we can't do right now, but has been for the companies that are virtual, either, especially if you're 100% virtual, not as important if you have partial working from home, but if you're 100% virtual, to bring everybody together, even if it's once a year, in one place to do some team building and some connecting and relationship building. We do team lunches over Zoom. So every Wednesday at noon, everybody grabs their lunch and sits down and has lunch together over Zoom. We used to do virtual games, or we used to do games Wednesdays at noon when we had a physical office. And so because we can't do that now, we moved it to at least everybody has lunch together. So that's Wednesdays at noon at our office. Team meetings, we have a team meeting once a week. It's mandatory regardless of what your schedule is and your flex schedule. The team meeting once a week for an hour is a mandatory slot that you have to attend. And we have done it where it's a team meeting and training. So it becomes usually, you know, a synopsis of, is there anything new happening in the company and the organization? We start out every team meeting with wins that everybody has to share. So we go around and everyone takes 30 seconds and shares a win that they've had either personally or professionally with the rest of the team. It was interesting when we started this, it was really tough. People couldn't come up with wins, and it's so much more natural for them now that, and it's a great way and a positive way of starting out your team meetings. But we do have team meetings where we have like kind of an overview update. We have in our project management system a project called team meetings. If there are things that people want to put on the agenda, training that they want, or questions that they have that they think would be helpful for everyone on the team to learn, they throw it into the agenda. So that's where we kind of start with the team meetings. And then there's a training component at the end of it where we talk about, you know, a new feature, or we've actually introduced something called show and tell that rotates between our team members. At the end of every meeting, it ends with whose ever turn it is to show something that they've learned that they think would be helpful for other team members, either client specific or software specific. It doesn't really matter. And there's been some really interesting things that have come out in that show and tell. So the team meetings is a big one for us for connection. Team mentors, this is especially important for new hires that are brought on board, because they don't have that ability to get to know everybody and connect. And so we always pair our new hires with a mentor where they are having a regular meeting with them, either daily, especially training for a while at the beginning is where they're shadowing somebody. And again, it's over Zoom, but having a mentor gives them an instant connection with somebody in the organization. So that's fairly important. This was one that I thought was interesting. Not something that we do, but it's an organization that has 100% virtual team. And as part of their compensation or for their team, they allow them a certain allowance of going to a co-working space, and the company will pick up the fee for it, which allows them to go out and actually be in public with other people. So I thought that was an interesting one. A virtual hub for announcements. This is something that we do, which it's a one page that if you have anything that you want to announce, you throw it there, or you can throw it. We have a chat channel, which is our water cooler, and that's what it's called, water cooler chat channel, which is the stuff that you would talk about while you're standing around the water cooler. Online games, online team activities, again, really, really important that you have some kind of a connection, that you're doing something together other than just working. We've done virtual escape rooms together. We've played bingo online together, wine tasting online together. So see what it is, that's the interest in your within your team members, and find something that they can all do together, but where they're not physically in the same place. We do it all through Zoom Hangouts. The one that we're doing, which is coming up, is we're doing a vision board exercise, where everyone is building their own vision boards, their own personal vision boards, but we're doing it together all at the same time over Zoom. And finding your community, like we've talked about, making connections internally within the team, but also, the Facebook groups, the LinkedIn groups. It's fairly important that you have those personal connections, that you're making them somewhere. And so go out and find your community. Okay, and a couple of other stats. 65% of employees report that after the pandemic, they would like some kind of ability to work full-time remotely, and 31% were looking for a hybrid, where they're some form of remote. So that's 96% of employees that were surveyed, and I think it was a Flex Jobs survey. 96% of the people want some kind of ability to work remotely, which is huge. And then just some examples of some companies that are fully remote, 100%. WagePoint, you're probably all familiar with in our industry. I think they have 75 employees now and have never had a physical office. I had to put AIS Solutions on there just because we are now fully remote. Zapier, teamwork.com, which is our project management system. Todoist is another, it's a to-do app, a to-do list app, 100% virtual remote organization. And then there's tons of companies which are hybrid. Intuit, you'll recognize. They allow their team to work from home part of the time. Google, Trello, HubSpot, Amazon, Cisco, some big names. So you can see that it is a trend that's absolutely here to stay. I don't think it's going anywhere. Okay. And I got 8 minutes left. Look at that. I actually have time left for some questions. So let's see if there are any questions that I have missed. Okay. What info do I pull from my dashboards? Okay, so I have, I probably have 5 that I look at all the time. But the main ones are, for me, I want to, for myself and my team leader, we want to make sure that nothing is falling through the cracks. And so we have built out dashboards per person on our team that shows us overdue tasks, shows them what their workload is, where they're falling behind on a client perspective, what challenges are that they're having. So we've got progress bars on our timers as well. So if there's a task, you know, and something is stuck at 90% because they're waiting for a client, then it allows, you know, our team leader to jump in and try and propel the project forward. The other one we look at is vacation schedule, flex schedule. So everyone tries to plan out their schedule. Most people like, especially in our industry, like some kind of pattern or some kind of routine. So most people on our team anyways tend to work similar hours day to day. And so being able to see if there are huge gaps where there's nobody working to cover in case a client calls in and needs to speak with someone, at least during business hours. So, you know, it's vacation and flex schedule. That's another one that we look at. Capacity planning is another one that I look at, which is how far along are they in their capacity before I know that I need to bring someone else on board. So we're going through a year of where we want to scale. We've got some big scaling initiatives, and so the resource and the capacity planning has become huge for me. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, so Megan has a planning meeting every Monday morning for all staff as well as a wind-up on Friday afternoon to review work completed, which has been extremely helpful and great for goal setting. Perfect. Thank you for sharing. And Diana, they've had games online. Codenames, the Card Word Association game, has a free online version. So if you haven't tried that one out, I haven't heard of that one. So I will certainly pass that along to my team leader as well. Codenames, which is interesting. We did an escape room. Like I said, we've done online bingo. Steam games lets you play with team members, up to 8 team members, I think. So we were using that for some of the smaller groups that we were playing. So lots of different options. Any other questions? I think, oh, there's some more questions coming in. Okay, do I believe remote work will be the new norm for the foreseeable future next year or so? I wish I had a crystal ball. I mean, based on the stats that was from that FlexJob survey, it certainly seems like yes is the answer. Whether it is 100% virtual, 100% remote, or some kind of hybrid, I think it is here to stay, especially as you find that more companies have identified that they're able to have employees work from home. And a lot of parents have, as much as the homeschooling I know has been a challenge, a lot of them have found that they've actually enjoyed being able to, be there when their kids are going to school and coming home. And so I think that the flex hours is going to be a bigger attraction for new employees. Okay, and Allison, how do I train and supervise entry-level employees? They're starting from scratch and need a lot of hand-holding. Okay, so we have kind of a unique system. We have created the Ninja 90 employee hiring system, which basically is a 90-day program for our new employees to go through. Because there is, as you said, Allison, there's a lot of hand-holding at the beginning that's needed. This kind of removes that a little bit, where they're able to learn independently for a significant period of time, and then be able to just have the support that's taking place in the background. The mentor is very important. All of our new hires are given a mentor where they're shadowing the person, they have questions. So being able to tag team them with somebody else and being able to give them some independence, where there are some things that they have to do on their own, is probably going to be most helpful. If you're interested in the Ninja 90 program, it is on our website, ninja.net. Just click on training and you'll be able to see it there. And it's Ninja with a K. Okay, so are all our employees paid salary? Yes, all of our employees are 100% salary, and they're all full-time as well. We don't have any part-time employees. And Christine asked, what dashboard are you using? It's actually built into our project management system, which is Teamwork, and you have the ability to slice and dice the information and create your own dashboards in there. And how do we deal with client telephone inquiries? Do all of these go to one person? Great question. So we have a program, actually not a program, a service, which is a virtual receptionist service. So if someone calls our main telephone line, it goes to the virtual receptionist. We also use VoIP for all of our office lines, so everyone has their own direct line as well. Clients will tend to call our team directly, but if it's a new inquiry or someone calls the main line, it's a virtual receptionist who knows when people are working, when people are off, will either take a message or forward the call on to the person that they've asked for. It's a great question. Okay, and we've got 2 minutes left. You're welcome, Kim. Are our remote staff all over Canada? Yes, we have BC, Alberta, Ontario, New Brunswick right now. Yes, I think that's it for right now. Tracy, this was great. We just hired our first remote employee this week. Excellent. Congratulations, Tracy. Although you're already running remote, right? Because Lisa's in BC and you're in Ontario. So you already got it going. You're already good. And Suzanne, if employees are salary, is there a set total of hours they have to work per month? Yes, so we're still a full, it's the same number of hours that they have to work. And I'm asked this question all the time is, how do I know that my team is actually working the number of hours that they're supposed to? They're working a 40-hour work week, they're working 35-hour work week. How do I know that? And if you're not sure, you shouldn't have hired them in the first place. The first thing you need to have is you need to trust the people that are on your team. If you don't trust them that they're taking advantage, then they shouldn't be on your team to start with. And quite honestly, if they're getting all of their work done in 20 hours, does it really matter? You're focusing on the results. If they should have more work that they should be able to do in a 40-hour work week, then absolutely you would give them more work. But that's where the resource and the capacity planning becomes so important, is I know that I've assigned them a client that's going to take them 10 hours a month, so I can fill 80% of their time with client work. That for me, the most important thing is that they get it done. So I hope that answers that question. And who do I use for virtual receptionist? I believe it's called Smile Dog. Honestly, I'm not involved in it at all. So, but I think it's called Smile Dog on the East Coast. And Steve said trust but verify, and they use T-sheets, works very well. And agree that you have to trust. Honestly, they can work their way around T-sheets if they want to. So you do need to trust them, because someone can log in and say they're working on a client and actually, you know, are doing their nails or having a cup of tea or reading a book. So you do have to have a measure of trust with your team, otherwise you have the wrong team. Okay, we're at 2:31, so we're going to sign off. Want to thank everyone for attending. You will get a recording as well as the white paper within the next 24 hours by email with the registration email. Hope you found this helpful, and hope you all have a fabulous 2021.